Welcome back to the Green Means Go channel. It's your host, me, and it's your excited host, me. As a longtime Seahawks fan, my team, and yes, I say my, yes, I use personal pronouns when discussing the team I root for. It is we that are playing the games. It is my team. I am in sole possession of the Seahawks. Get over it. I'm fine if fans do that, especially if they have dedicated as much time and attention to their teams as I have. So the Seahawks, my Seahawks, have been very busy this offseason, and specifically this last week. I actually had a comment on one of my sports betting videos that said, hey, I'm excited to hear you talk about the newest addition, which was Kupp. That comment actually sparked this video. I went through a lot of the data behind it, the statistics, the money, the salary cap, all of that. And the more that I make these YouTube videos, the more that I realize I have certain strengths and weaknesses, certain preferences, and things that maybe I sometimes do for the sake of the viewer that I shouldn't necessarily devote a ton of time to. And just looking at all of those measurable statistics isn't necessarily where I pride myself a lot of the time. I think I have a decent grasp on just the optics of situations, the feel of situations. And I know that anybody can say that, and maybe that's not the best thing to rely on, but it's what I'm most comfortable talking about. So here's a little chart. We got our losses and our gains from the Seahawks pretty much this past week. It dips into 2 weeks ago with Geno Smith and DK Metcalf. Geno Smith gets traded to the Raiders. The Seahawks save, I believe, I said I wasn't going to talk about it, but about $30 million in cap space, which is great. I will say that from a fan perspective, I'm a little sad. I appreciated what Geno Smith did. I think he took a lot of heat at certain times, and I don't think it was deserved. Last season was not the best, a lot of interceptions, but overall, I like Geno. I knew he wasn't the future, and we'll talk about the addition of Sam Darnold next and what I think that means for the future. But as far as I see it, a Geno Smith for Sam Darnold trade is one that I can live with, one that I'm happy with. And I'm happy for Geno to be able to go play for Pete Carroll again and reunite that. So I think all in all, I'm fine with that. Metcalf, I was outspoken about this in a previous video. I am definitely fine with Metcalf going. I said in that video, I think he underperformed for our team. He was not very good. There was a statistic that I saw this week at contested catches. He was one of the worst wide receivers at contested catches. Yes, he has speed. Yes, he can take the top off the defense. Yes, he can get attention from safeties. But all in all, I think DK Metcalf is a little bit overrated, and he was going to demand too much money. And because of that, I think we made the best decision getting rid of him at this point in time. So good for that. And then Lockett is our last big loss of the year. That one hurts. And just somebody who's always been on the Seahawks for, I don't know, 10 years probably, roughly 10 years. I think that that's just more of an emotional thing. And I would prefer that he retires or he comes back to the team in some way, restructures the contract, and hangs out for a little bit. But I don't think that's going to happen due to what their gains have been. So we'll start at the top with Sam Darnold. A little bit of a shock, not a terrible shock, but a shock in a good way. I didn't expect Sam Darnold to come to Seattle. I don't know where I expected him to go after the Vikings said that they were not going to re-sign him, but I was not hopeful. He signs a 3-year deal worth over $100 million. It's either $100 or $150 million. It's a lot of money, but I think what he was able to do last year in Minnesota. He was in the Minnesota last year, over there in that Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes, that Minnesota. I think he played well. I think he revitalized his career. I think he should have won Comeback Player of the Year. I think that, again, a lot of people are looking at Sam Darnold negatively because of the last 2 games he played last season, and I don't think that's fair. The problem is he had very good weapons there, and I was a little scared because at the time of his signing, Seattle had just lost their weapons. So, what are you going to do? I think a lot of Sam Darnold's success was due to his weapons. What's he going to do without Metcalf and Lockett? Well, of course, he has Jackson Smith and Jigba. And this week, yesterday, actually, they made a big move. We'll talk about that in a second. DeMarcus Lawrence, a very big surprise signing from the Cowboys. Age worries me. He's getting the most money he can. I think it's 3 years, $42 million. He just played 4 games last year, had a foot sprain, I believe. Maybe he could have came back at the end of the year had the Cowboys actually had a season worth salvaging. They did not, so maybe they kept him out for safety. I'm optimistic. I'm a little worried because he's 30, 33, somewhere in there. He's older for a player, but he's a 4-time Pro Bowler. He will fit into a defense and a defensive line like Mike Macdonald, defensive line and defensive-minded guy like Mike Macdonald. I think it's what Seattle needs in terms of a true playmaker. I think for a long time, since really the Legion of Boom days with Bobby Wagner, Brandon Browner, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas, Richard Sherman, we have not had guys who can disrupt plays. We have had, journeymen. We have had grinders. We've had dudes who come in and work hard, but they're never going to make a Pro Bowl. They're never going to cause a stir. They're never going to be talked about. And I think that Lawrence gives us a potential avenue to get some of that swagger back in the defense. So I'm optimistic, but I am slightly cautious about the age and the injuries. However, if he can stay healthy and stay young, I think it's a beautiful addition. I think it will work well. So the biggest news of all of this is probably Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp. Funny enough, when he was released by the Rams, I want to say Thursday, I made this TikTok and I said, I have 3 predictions about where he's going to go. Seahawks, Broncos, Titans were my 3 picks. I said, I think he'll stay in the division. I said, we see teams do that a lot. And I have a gut feeling with Seattle losing Metcalf and Lockett, they're going to make a push for Kupp. I'm not right all the time. In fact, I'm wrong a lot more than I'm right. But on that specific day, I was correct. Cooper Kupp signs with the Seahawks, 3 years, $45 million, another pretty big paycheck. And it's sort of an echo of the DeMarcus Lawrence. I do worry about his history with injuries. He has had some of the best seasons statistically in the NFL at the wide receiver position. I also think that was partly due to the benefit of having a guy like Matthew Stafford on the team. So is Sam Darnold going to be able to replicate that success and put Cooper Kupp in positions to be a real threat, be a real player on this team? I hope so. But I recognize that we sort of duplicated what we already had, and that's maybe my biggest concern. Jackson Smith-Njigba and Cooper Kupp are both slot guys. They are both better when they can shift around, move around, line up in the slot, catch intermediate and short passes. I believe they both ranked in the top 5 last year or close to it. I know Kupp may have been injured and kind of had an off year, but as far as slot receivers, both of them were acknowledged as above average. We'll just say that. I don't remember the specific statistic, but both of them were good slot guys last year. So that, do we need 2 guys who could do the same thing? Don't love it, but for the dynamic offense that it could create for, again, the veteran leadership, it could create for just kind of an overall shift. Like, the worst thing that Seattle could have done is brought in Sam Darnold, paid him $50 million a year, and then said, good luck, work with this horrible offensive line and Jackson Smith-Njigba, throw him to the wolves. So even if it doesn't work, I applaud John Schneider. I applaud the front office of the Seahawks to get after it, to say, look, we went out and got Darnold. So what, right? We got our coffee mug. What are we going to put inside of it? Okay. I mean, how many empty coffee mugs do you have laying around? If you don't have a fresh brew, you got nothing. So they went out and got the fresh brew of Cooper Kupp. He's a Seattle guy, not a Seattle guy, Washington guy. I forgot about that until one of my friends mentioned it yesterday in the group chat. He's a Rams fan, funny enough. So he was a little bit saddened that they let Kupp go and more saddened that he went to my team. But he gets to go home. And I think, again, it's a good fit. Now, a little bit of a funky addition. One that I actually missed because there were no alerts about it because he's Marquez Valdes-Scantling, he's Marquez Valdes-Scantling. What are you going to do? He gets signed to a 1-year deal. It's like $3 million. I mean, it's pocket change to these guys. And I love it. And I'll tell you why I love it, because Seattle fires Ryan Grubb and they hire Clint Kubiak, who was the offensive coordinator for the Saints last year. Now, don't get me wrong. The Saints offense last year was a mess. Of course, Derek Carr was injured. Of course, Kamara had his moments. Of course, they didn't have Chris Olave goes down. They didn't have a lot of tools at their disposal, but they weren't fantastic. However, their one shining piece last year, outside of Alvin Kamara, was Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who spends some time in Green Bay and I would say played pretty well with Aaron Rodgers, then goes to Kansas City and goes to the Super Bowl, wins a Super Bowl as a lead receiver almost for that team, but nothing that jumps off the page at you. Goes to the Saints, kind of doesn't exist for 4, 5, 6 weeks, and then all of a sudden comes on and really takes the top off the defense and shows some real signs of playmaking with Clint Kubiak. So now both of them, who showed promise last year, one of the only bright spots of the Saints offense, come and join Sam Darnold, Cooper Kupp, Jackson Smith-Njigba. My biggest fear with losing Metcalf was that he could take the top off a defense, so to speak. He could go deep and drag that defense, spread them out a little bit, and let Jackson Smith-Njigba and Tyler Lockett work underneath. Well, now we have Cooper Kupp and Jackson Smith-Njigba who can work underneath. Is Marquez Valdes-Scantling our deep threat? When I say that, as you can see, I shudder. I don't love saying it. If you sit here and tell me right now that Marquez Valdes-Scantling is going to be our only deep threat guy for Cooper to open up the field for Cooper Kupp and Jackson Smith-Njigba, I'm going to say, are you sure about that? You sure that's what we want to do? But maybe the defense thinks the same way, and they play more on the short and intermediate routes of Kupp and Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Valdes-Scantling has a tremendous year because nobody's thinking about him, because I'm not thinking about him. So I think there is a dynamic aspect to this offense that is being built that Seattle has not had in a while. And when I think about ceilings, and I think about, can this team work perfectly? Let's say all the puzzle pieces come together and fit perfectly. We get Kenneth Walker back. We get Zach Charbonnet, two running backs who do different things, but both do those things well. We have two fast, small slot guys who can motion, who can confuse the defense, who can run unique routes. And we have a guy in Marquez Valdes-Scantling who finds his fountain of youth and can take the top off a defense. We have Sam Darnold, who is competent, who is composed, who understands the playbook, and can distribute where he needs to. It rivals some of the best potential offense that I have seen in Seahawks history. Because if we want to rewind to my original fandom, Matt Hasselbeck, Sean Alexander, Nate Burleson, Deion Branch, that core, and Deion Branch kind of came in late, that core was nearly one of the more potent offenses that the Seahawks ever had. Bring in Russell Wilson, and then there was like a dead period, just awful. Just like we were running Charlie Whitehurst and Cynical Wallace, and just we don't talk about those days. Russell Wilson comes in, and Doug Baldwin made a name for himself. Jermaine Kearse made a name for himself. Tyler Lockett obviously made a name for himself, but they weren't guys that the league discussed. Marshawn Lynch obviously was a massive piece and could do things and helps offenses. But when I think about just overall, we finally have some names really on this team. So and again, I think it can all weave its way in. I think arguments can be made about how an offense may be perceived in terms of playmaking and potential at each of those ways. I'm not discrediting what Wilson, Lynch, and Baldwin, Kearse were able to do, but when we think about their runs, a lot of it was based on the fact that their defense was holding teams to 12 points a game. So, I'm optimistic. We'll just say that. If you'll notice, and the last thing I'll say is the one thing I did not discuss is the offensive line. What was the biggest problem last year for Geno Smith? Yeah, turnovers, but how do turnovers happen? Often a quarterback makes a bad decision. Why does a quarterback make a bad decision? Because they're put in a position where they can't make a good decision. They don't have time. They're getting blitzed. They're getting rushed. They're not getting protected. So if we can't fix our offensive line, the last 15 minutes of discussion that we've had may be all for naught. That's a problem. Now, with the Metcalf and Geno Smith trades, Seattle was able to acquire some good draft picks, second round, third round picks. They have one in the first, I believe 2 in the second, 2 in the third. That's good. I mean, that's great. So my guess is with the 18th overall pick, they're going to add an offensive lineman. They're going to make a move in the offseason for an offensive lineman, because if they start the season the same way they ended the season last year, all this means nothing. Sorry. If you can't protect in the NFL, you can't run the ball in the NFL, it doesn't allow you to do much. So those are my thoughts. Thank you guys. That felt good. Like I can see myself stressing over creating a template of like, money, salary, stats. Blah, blah, blah. No. Get on here and just speak from the heart, Green Means Go. That's what we did today. I love it. We'll see you soon. I got some big things planned. Big things, guys. I got some really big dreams. We got a really big team. We're going to be coming with no steam. Better be coming with those rings. We have some ideas for March Madness and baseball coming down the pipeline. I got some other video reviews for products that are coming out. I've been doing some OddsJam stuff. That's been fun. Hopefully it's helpful for you guys. But I got some more things coming down the pipeline. We're cooking. I'm trying not to be overwhelmed. I'm trying to stay the course. I'm trying to deliver you guys content. So thank you for being patient with me through all the ups and downs, ins and outs, backwards and forwards. And we'll see you soon.